You've got to kind of make sure you don't become about trying to make money for yourself, because that's a really crap advisor, right? You have to go in there saying, I really want to help this person, right? If I can't help them, I shouldn't be doing this job. A friend of mine asked me about it probably 2014, and I said, what a load of crap, don't go anywhere near that stuff. And then I started to learn just how important Bitcoin was. I don't think people realize, like, the US debt clock. Once you're borrowing money to pay your existing debt, that's a point of no return, right? Where's the insurance policy? So Bitcoin felt like such a natural fit to this. It totally re-energized me. It makes the future look much more interesting. It changes the way you think about money. It alters the way you view the world, but it makes you feel very optimistic about the future. Everything we're doing right now is being prepared, ready for when the questions come. Because what we don't want to do is get caught out when people start saying, what is this Bitcoin thing? And we'll go, we need to come away and come back to you on that one. We'll just know the answers, because it's so unique and it's such a big opportunity. It's very, very important that people get it. I will find a way to incorporate it, because I just think it's very, very important.
Chris Clark, welcome to the Bitcoin IFA podcast.
Thank you, Dan. Morning.
Morning. So you are the founder and owner of Advanced Wealth, an IFA firm practicing out of Chelmsford.
That's it.
We've actually spoken offline a couple of times, and your office is about 50 yards up the road from where I grew up, the house I grew up in. So talk to us about your IFA journey. How did you become an IFA? How did you end up starting Advanced Wealth?
Well, okay, so I really started out in mobile phones and learned soft skills in sales and so on, like at the beginning of the millennium. And I travelled, I lived up north and in Nottingham and places like that. And then I really just decided one day that I found money really interesting. So the best way to learn about it was to sit in the middle of it somewhere, right, between the people that invest it, the fund managers, and the people that want to invest. So it looked to me like financial advice was the most suitable route. I started by going to Standard Life, a life company, to learn bits and pieces, to take my exams, stuff like that. I was there for a couple of years, and then I left to become what's known as a paraplanner to a small IFA firm. And of course, paraplanners are, if you like, researchers that do the background work for financial advisors. So I did that for a while, but that was a small firm of, say, 4 people in Bishop Stortford, and they got taken over by a group called the Think Group, who became Bluefin later, right? And they didn't really want me. They said, look, we don't want any paraplanners. There's not much use for you there. You've got 2 choices. You can leave, or you can become a self-employed financial advisor and just best of luck sort of thing, right? And I thought, well, look, I've got no kids yet. I was with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I was in that place where it's like, if I don't do it now, I ain't going to do it, right? So I just said, well, let's just give it a go. One guy came to me and he said, well, what are your expenses? And they were like £1,000 a month at the time, essential expenses. He says, can you sell a £50 life assurance policy once a month? And I thought, I can do that, right? Surely I can do that. So if I can do that, I'll be just fine, and we'll get this going. But I didn't sleep for weeks, right? It was really stressful. But then I started, and I was wondering how on earth I'm going to get leads. Are you ringing from a phone book or whatever, which the rules around are very strict and so on. And then I found that this company had hired hundreds of other advisors who had just forgotten about half their clients, right? So an endowment statement would turn up in the post, and no one's got any contact details for this person. So they'd say, oh, Chris, do you want this, right? See what you can do with it. So I'd even get this, say, I can't find a phone number. I'll go and knock on this guy's door and say, look, we're here if you need us, kind of thing. And one of my first clients, I remember, it was a lady. She was a secretary at a company down the road, and she had £20,000 in an old Guardian pension. I put it through this system that felt like magic to me, called O&M Pensions Profiler. And you put it in, and it measures the charges and so on, and it says, what are you going to end up in X amount of time? And she was going to end up with, on a like-for-like basis, £5,000 more and it wasn't going to cost her anything, because it was all built in commission and stuff at the time. So it's like, this is incredible. Why doesn't everybody know about this? So it became my thing to get pension statements, run them through a calculator and say, hi, do you realize that this is this is here. Can I come and talk to you about it? That just steamrolled, and I did that, multiple times. And then before you know it, you've got like 200 clients, and you think, well, that's good. That's kind of it where you make it. But then a couple of things happened. A friend of mine bought me a book called How the Best Get Better, who's now my business partner, by the way. And another friend introduced me to, he said to go to this event by a company called Action Coach, and they're business coaches, where I met somebody called Andy Sleet, who in my mind is an incredible business coach, right? And between reading that book and meeting Andy, I was saying to Andy, who I still deal with now, what should I do? I want to start a business one day, right? But what steps do I need to take and all the rest of it? And he's going, well, why one day? Why aren't you doing it right now? What are you waiting for? I said, well, I don't know. I guess I need to wait to save more money and all these excuses, right? And he gave me a book like The E-Myth, which is amazing. He said, well, what you want to do is break this down. It feels like too big a task. So write a list of 10 things you need to do to get started, right? So ring the FCA and get a registration, open a bank account, get the accountant to set up a limited company. So I started on this list. Every Friday I used to work on this stuff, work on the business day. And when I started getting on that list, that magic word momentum built. And before I knew it, we're 2 weeks in, a month in or whatever, it's like, I've accidentally created a business that's ready to go, right? All I've got to do now is call up 200 clients, right? Not easy, but as long as that's fine, we can move them over and the business has begun. So I did that, but it was particularly scary at that time. This is 2009, because my wife was pregnant with our first. We're just in the middle of getting married, we got married, then she's pregnant. And then she got made redundant, right? Just as I'm doing all of this. It's like, cool, this is stressful.
And it's the middle of the GFC as well.
Yeah, that's it. And absolutely, that happened when we were on our honeymoon. And I had £10,000 in the bank at the time, and I owed that to the tax man, right? And I knew I had to pay that in a few months' time. So I had to make it, right? I had no choice. But that gave me an enormous work ethic, and you get up very early when you have to make it, right? So I'm grateful for that time. I'm grateful that it was hard, because I wouldn't have done as well without that learning experience. So I did that. So of course, from 2009 until lockdown, I was just plowing away at seeing as many people as possible. I have some techniques I use, because you got to kind of make sure you don't become about trying to make money for yourself, because that's a really crap advisor, right? You have to go in there saying, I really want to help this person, right? If I can't help them, I shouldn't be doing this job. And my technique for that was to sit in the car or somewhere before a meeting, shut my eyes for 2 minutes and just play out the meeting in my mind, keep saying over and over in my mind, I'm here to help, I'm here to help, I'm here to help, right? And then sometimes you have to honestly give up huge bits of business to keep your integrity, which was difficult, at the harder times, but it works in the end, because of course you get referrals and all the rest of it when that comes good. And we've just built a business that way, and now there's 20 of us. I think there's 6 or 7 advisors, something like that. And I think that's what we'll stay as. But that's where we are. And it kind of takes us to here. I mean, lockdown did us a lot of good, because we restructured. We had breathing space. It was really useful to us. And yeah, we redesigned the business in a positive way. And we're benefiting from that now. And of course, now I'm looking at this and saying, well, where do we go next? And I see things like Bitcoin, and I think this is really interesting,
What a journey. You touched on a lot of things there I want to ask you about. So, for someone getting into the industry, if someone's watching this and they're just getting into the profession, how much would you say those soft skills that you picked up working in phones? I presume you were in a shop trying to sell phones.
I was on the road selling fleets of handsets to companies, truck drivers and all the rest of it. They were kind of CB radios and mobile phones at the same time. This company went bust. It was kind of a crappy product, right? But it gave me the insight into how you structure a sales meeting. And we need to not be so arrogant as to think we're not selling, because if you're a lawyer, you're selling, right? If you're a doctor, you're selling. It's just you need these skills. It helps people feel comfortable. It helps people persuade people to do things that are good for them, right? So if we can get that belief system out of the way, there's a course I went on called Metamorphose, and it gave a structure like when you meet someone, find out the big picture, find out what bothers them, find out what their objectives are, and if you build your solution around the answers you get, then you get somewhere. But my real soft skills came from when I started the business, and the business coach introduced me to lots of different things, not least a book called The Psychology of Selling by Brian Tracy, which I read and listened to multiple times because the guy's one of the best at this stuff, and how you sell on emotion. You know, what's someone's hot button. Okay, if you find out, in the book they describe how selling a house and someone really likes the cherry tree in the garden, you just keep coming back to that, right? And you can do it in financial services, because if you know someone's major objective is, I want to leave money behind for my children and so on, then you can keep reverting back to the main objective. And for me, soft skills, and I don't think IFAs always fully believe this, but soft skills are like 90%, I believe. The exams are, they're fine. They give you the license and you need the technical knowledge. But with technical knowledge, you can always say, I'll come back to that, especially with AI now, right? I'll give you the answer next time if you're not sure. But soft skills are absolutely critical to, build relationships and keep them.
I completely agree, especially what you said there about looking things up. So it's actually an Einstein quote, which is never memorize anything that you can look up. So you're absolutely correct that the vast majority of this profession is the soft skills if you want to make it as an advisor. And if you're walking into any meeting, any sales meeting, and doing the majority of the talking and not asking questions, you're not doing it right. And that's so I had a previous career in ad tech and marketing, and part of that was selling. And we had multiple trainings, and you always need to you're exactly right. Find the emotive thing that someone's going to put their hat on, whether it's buying a house, whether it's leaving money behind, etc., etc.
Yeah, two ears, one mouth, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. And I really liked what you said there about, you're trying to sell people things, but you're trying to sell them something to do them good. And I really like that as a framing, because that's, that is exactly, I would hope that's what the job should be. And I would hope that that's what most people are doing in the profession. That's really good. I really like that you touched on visualization there. So you would sit in the car and visualize the meeting going well, and reminding yourself I do a lot of visualization. So it's something that really helps, especially because the brain can't tell the difference between reality and imagination. So if you're imagining it going well, you're taking care of half the battle. Absolutely love that. Okay, so you mentioned Bitcoin. This is the Bitcoin IFA podcast. Let's come on to that. So a question that I always like to ask people is, everyone's against Bitcoin until they're for it. So what's your Bitcoin story?
Yeah, I'd say that was true for me. A friend of mine asked me about it probably 2014, and I said, what a load of crap, don't go anywhere near that stuff, right? As I do, without any research whatsoever. Then I had a really weird route to it. It started with Jimmy Savile, right? Can I say that on?
Okay, elaborate.
All right. I had to think, well, where did this start, right? And it was like, okay, Jimmy's. So all of that stuff happens, right? And I'm like, well, I'm going to take a really interesting. Who on earth was warning the world about this guy before everyone else knew? Because then I'm going to take them seriously. And I started digging into these researchers and ended up in the world of alternative info, right? And I'll cut a lot of that story short, but there was a podcast called The Unexplained, right, which delves into this stuff. And on that podcast was someone called Courtney Brown, and they do remote viewing, right? Now, remote viewing is just it's a military designed mental protocol. Like some people, they'll sit in one room and they'll tell you what's on the pack of cards in the other room, and no one knows how they do that, however. But there's a group of people who do that in a scientific way. They're professors.
It's also, sorry to interrupt you there, Chris.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of stuff like this. There's a great channel called the Y Files, which I really like.
Okay.
Where he tells a story, like a conspiracy theory, but then he usually debunks it at the end. So it's like, 20 minutes of really interesting story, conspiracy thing, and then 10 minutes of debunking it. And there's only a few that he's never really been able to debunk. And one of them is remote viewing.
Interesting.
And one of the things he points to is the amount of money that the CIA have thrown at remote viewing has been, it's obscene. So it is a well-researched scientific investigation into how people are able to see things not only on the other side of the planet, but in parts of the solar system, and also go forwards and backwards in time with it as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
I can't tell you how happy I am you've said that, because often I'll get a really weird look with remote viewing. But so anyway, so I started listening to these remote viewers. They're called Farsight, and they had this guy's son and their friends. They're into cryptocurrencies, right? And this was 2018. And they were remote viewing the future price of cryptocurrencies. So, okay, I don't know much about this, but let's have a little dabble with it, just to see what the big deal is. So I bought what I thought was called Ethereum at the time, Ziliqua, Mana, and then a bit of Bitcoin. And at the time I'm thinking, should I bother with this Bitcoin? I've missed the boat, all that kind of stuff, right? I think about half a Bitcoin, right?
In 2018, so it was what, like $3,000 or something?
It was September 2018. It was 7.5. I remember at the time for one whole one. So I thought I'll do this and then see if they're right, because why not? I did it, and they tend to have about a 70% success rate. So it's really, it's better than most fund managers. So it's quite interesting. And then I was down 50% for ages, and I just thought, I just forgot about it. I checked on it every few months. I think I caught it halfway through a crash at the time. So yeah, I forgot about it. And then lockdown came along, right? Obviously like 2 years later. And of course we had the initial problem in March, May, whenever it was, 2020, there's a drop in everything. And then they switched on the money printers and everything went up. And of course, Bitcoin profited like the most because it went up the most. Tesla bought it. MicroStrategy started to buy it in August. And I'm checking on my value here and I'm thinking, what the hell's going on? This is going up loads. This is a lot more interesting than it used to be. So then I decided to apply some of the time in lockdown to understanding it more. And at the time, of course, like most people, I invested in lots of crap that I shouldn't have. Terra Luna was, of course, one of them, and and some other famous ones. Some okay, some not so much. But it led me to a podcast it's called Invest Answers. A guy called James there, who is remarkable. He does a daily video. He retired many years ago, so he's gotten very rich as far as I can tell. Lives in California, does this for free, I believe. there's no obvious income for him that I can see. They seem to give income to animal charities and so on. He's been doing it for 5 years now, I think, something like that. And he's big on, he introduced me to MicroStrategy. I wouldn't have known what that was. In effect, of course, and Tesla and Solana at the time, which I'm not in now, but he likes a lot, and Bitcoin. And then I started to learn just how important Bitcoin was and the amount of geniuses in that arena. Because I even keep a note on my phone of geniuses, very clever, worthless, and it's kind of subcategories. And in the genius category these days, I've got Michael Saylor, Max Kaiser, Jason Lowry, Jeff Booth, who was kind enough to do a Zoom call with us, and these people I could listen to all day long, as I suspect you could too, and they're just remarkable individuals. And for me, I think if you've got the internet, such a wonderful thing, right, and YouTube, because you've got all of this incredible knowledge for free now. Whereas before you'd have no access to these people whatsoever, unless it's 5 minutes on Bloomberg. So I've obsessively watched this stuff for years now, and I'd call myself a 95% Bitcoin maxi, if you like.
Well, it's same. I think I actually had a cleansing in the last few weeks, so I cleared out all of my alts. Invested some of it into Bitcoin and then some of it into Bitcoin treasury companies. You've mentioned Strategy there, but there's a couple of British ones now doing great guns, SmarterWeb and Coincilium. So because I can buy those within my tax wrappers. So if those alts had gone up, great, but I was looking at a sizable capital gains tax or payment on those. Whereas, if these treasury companies within my ISA go up, then it's free from capital gains, and I'll probably just hold it in there, roll it into the next cycle. So that's so it sounds like, so you had a dabble 2018, but it was really lockdown that gave you the space to sort of drive that curiosity. And you are absolutely not alone there. So I know some big names. Joe Bryan is one that did exactly the same. I had a fairly similar journey to you. So I was told about Bitcoin in 2012, 2015, 2017, 2018, 2019. I invested in a friend's company. And he actually told me, you should take some of this money and invest it in Bitcoin. He was actively trying to get me to invest less with him and to actually invest in Bitcoin. And I was saying, no. Haven't done a minute's research. Governments will never allow it. It's too disruptive. That was the story that I had convinced myself on without having done a minute's research. And like you, lockdowns, I was in Lebanon at the time experiencing hyperinflation in real time. And I was in lockdowns in a hotel room, and that gave me the space and the curiosity, and obviously the tipping point of actually actively experiencing hyperinflation to my own detriment. I lost about $400 worth of buying power in 3 days.
Wow.
So yeah, I think having that space to be curious, and that's something I think is a bit of a challenge for a lot of financial advisors, right? This profession can be very busy, very time consuming, especially with a lot of the regulatory red tape. So just having the space to actually be able to be curious can be quite difficult, I think, for some. And that's why we're here, right? So we want to help cross that barrier or alleviate that barrier to entry. So we produce webinars and workshops. We're coming into Advanced Wealth in a few months to present to you and your team. And the whole point is to take you from zero knowledge to, I like to think of it as the Pareto effect. So I'll get you to about 80% there in less than 2 hours, enough to talk comfortably with clients about it, because most of your clients are going to be in the same boat, which is they don't have 5 to 10 hours to 100 hours to really research this thing. And it is a huge paradigm shift. So let's talk about that. Having done by lockdown, I think you've probably done a decade and a half in traditional financial advice by that point.
Mm-hmm.
How much of a paradigm shift was it for you? And what happened as a consequence afterwards? Hey team, a very quick pause. If you're a financial advisor, wealth manager, or accountant, chances are your clients have already asked you about Bitcoin. And if they haven't, they soon will. Which is why I've created the Bitcoin IFA webinars. The webinars are designed to give you all of the information you need to confidently talk about Bitcoin with your clients. They're on demand, so you can watch them at a time that's suitable for you. They count as 90-minute structured CPD, and you'll get priority access to the Bitcoin IFA community. Head over to thebitcoinifa.com to book your webinar today. It takes less than 60 seconds. Again, that's thebitcoinifa.com to book. Now, back to the episode.
Okay, so in terms of a paradigm shift, I don't feel like I went through a big jolt particularly, because everything just sounded so logical to me. When you start digging into the stuff that I don't think people realize, like the US debt clock, right? And when they get to the point now where it's $1 trillion a year in interest payment, more than their defense. And you see what's happening in Lebanon and all the rest of it, and you don't think it can happen to a major economy. But once you're borrowing money to pay your existing debt, that's a point of no return, right? So where'd you go? Yeah, exactly. So it's like, where's the insurance policy, right? There's gold out there, and when you look at Bitcoin and you listen, Michael Saylor explains it best, of course, with there's never been anything else in the world that has a limited supply. You could argue gold, but people dig bigger holes when there's more demand for gold and what have you, and there's paper gold and all the rest of it. So we just haven't heard anything.
And gold as well. So gold typically has a stock to flow ratio of 2%.
Right.
So we add about 2% new gold every year. And that's actually where Keynesian economists got the 2% target inflation rate,
I see.
because what they've said was gold has always maintained its value and we add 2% a year to it. So if we take our currency, back it by nothing, but only increase the supply by 2% a year, it should maintain its value.
I see. No, I never realised that, because I remember Jerome Powell being asked why it's 2%, and he couldn't answer. It's like, what's going on here? So yeah, when you're in that, and of course when you're in the middle of a financial crash and all the rest of it, like lockdown was, and you're thinking, well, if you close down the entire economy, what are the second order effects of this and third order effects, which of course we see in inflation and all the rest now. So Bitcoin felt like such a natural fit to this, especially when you got clever people explaining it to you. So I just got really excited by it. I thought this is really something quite special. So and suddenly you want everyone else to know you found this amazing thing, but then they're not as interested as you are and all the rest of it. But you just kind of do your bit. So that was it for me. It wasn't too challenging.
Okay, so there's something you touched on there that I actually want to explore a bit more. So then, how do you once you do find this thing and you think this could be a lifeboat for everyone? I've been, I was a regulated financial advisor for a hot minute, for about 6 months. And I was sat with clients who were broke, 55, accessing their 50K pension now because they're broke. And I'm like, this thing in theory is supposed to last you until you're 100. You've got almost half your life to go in theory, and you're accessing your 50K pension now. You need Bitcoin, and I can't talk to you about it. My desire to provide you the best client outcome is negated by my sense of self-preservation, which is that I break the law by talking to you about it. I also get fired. How do you reconcile that, finding this thing that just makes total sense to you? How do you reconcile that with your role as the owner of Advanced Wealth and an independent financial advisor?
Okay, well, of course, yeah, because I've always been honest with clients about how I invest, and we have to tread that fine line of obviously never giving advice to buy Bitcoin. I suppose being the owner gives me a little bit more flexibility, although I've still got a compliance officer that would kick me in if I didn't do it properly. The way I've done it now is to explain that I show the US debt clock, for instance, right, and tell them what's going on in the world, because you can do that in a very general way, and then tell them what I invest in, which is generally half of what I do is in the stuff that I recommend as a general portfolio for everybody else, and I say, in the interest of honesty, I also do this. Right, I'm not advising you to do it. I would say, however, to them, learn something about it. Right, do your own research, make your own decisions. I can't advise you on it, but I found it very interesting. You might, right? And I mean, we keep books lying around like Jeff Booth's Price of Tomorrow, which explains it very well. These are famous books, of course, the Bitcoin Standard, and I love this one, Bitcoin Explained Like I'm 5, because people haven't got time to read, right? And that's by Coin Corner guys. And I say, look, if you want a book, take it. Right, I'm not advising you on it, but it's a really smart thing to do to understand, because new asset classes come around every few hundred years. It might be like buying a bit of Manhattan, or it might be like a gold rush. It might not, but you've got a duty to make yourself aware. And that's where I am with it. And I'm sitting around praying for the regulator to give some clarity. Perhaps there will be asset allocation models that start showing 1% in, hopefully, Bitcoin rather than crypto, but we'll see. And then we start to be able to have proper conversations about this stuff, because we know it's an important hedge, at least, but not everybody else does yet.
Yeah, I think you've touched on something there that's absolutely correct, which is, everyone is their own risk manager in their own life. But we in this profession are professional risk managers for ourselves and our clients. And I think you're absolutely correct. When something as groundbreaking as this comes along, I think there is a fiduciary duty to, at the very least, educate yourself on it. Even if you're not going to recommend it to your clients, you need to get up to speed with this thing and have a very good reason why you're not going to recommend it, if you're not going to recommend it. And that's people's prerogative. There are always going to be some people that are totally anti-Bitcoin, and that's fine. But then, typically when people end up doing a few hours, 100 hours research on this, they're like, oh, maybe I should have some. It's the famous quote from Satoshi. I think, you might want to buy some in case this thing takes off. And, it was a few cents a Bitcoin at the time. So
that's it.
It's probably taken off, I think we can say from there. So it's really interesting. And we had the recent FCA proposal to lift the ban on Bitcoin ETNs. They're obviously in consultation at the moment. My understanding is, from people much more experienced in this than me, that the FCA tend to only do these kind of consultations and the proposals once they've actually made up their mind. So there is a very high likelihood that this ban is going to be lifted as soon as Q3. So we're in Q3 now.
Really?
We record on the 2nd of July. So at some point within the next 3 months, probably, we're going to have retail access. So how are you and Advanced Wealth thinking about that and preparing for that?
Well, we make a point of making sure we understand it ourselves. Okay, so between all the advisors here, I think it's fair to say that all of them are invested to some degree, and they all understand it a lot. I've actually also gave away a small amount of Bitcoin to every member of staff, because I just want everyone to have some skin in the game to understand it, because everything we're doing right now is being prepared, ready for when the questions come. Now, if we know the answer is great, I tend to bring it up in every team meeting, and we've done videos on it. Of course, you guys are coming in to help make sure we know what we're talking about, because what we don't want to do is get caught out when people start saying, "What is this Bitcoin thing?" And we'll go, "We need to come away and come back to you on that one." We'll just know the answers, and we would have already made the mistakes of going into other cryptos and stuff like that. We've got the badges, so we're just set and ready to go. That's where we are.
So, you've got the bruises from altcoins. Yeah,
that's it. So we're just in the self-education stage. I mean, we're ready now, but we'd like to be self-confident when the questions come.
I think that's great preparation. And what are you seeing from clients? Has there been an increase in questions and inquiries about Bitcoin?
Hey team, just a quick pause to say a huge thank you. You've given us your most precious assets, your time and your attention. And honestly, it means the world to us. If you've enjoyed this episode or you take value from these conversations, it would really mean a lot if you could like, comment, or subscribe. Those things really help the algorithm and they help the channel to grow. And if there's someone in your life who would take value from this, maybe a fellow advisor or someone just curious about Bitcoin, please send it their way. You never know what it might spark. Okay, back to the studio.
It'd be wrong of me to say there was really increase, but not substantial. We'll tend to go through reviews with people, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, and I've got that few £1,000s on Coinbase in Ethereum or whatever." People have got XRP and so on. So people are dabbling. I mean, our client bank's mostly over 60. I think there's a demographic thing going on there. So no, I wouldn't say people are coming to us and asking major questions right now. Just the occasional one,
Okay, but then let's forward project a little. Let's say the ETN ban is lifted in 6 weeks from now, 8 weeks from now. What would be your immediate next steps from there?
Immediate, I would go and try and find an asset allocation tool that includes it, right? Because that's essential to have a proper stochastics profile in, because we can't make it up ourselves. Once we've got that, I will find a way to incorporate it, because I just think it's very, very important. I'm of the belief, as it happens, that one day these portfolio asset allocations will be part Bitcoin, part cash, probably dollar, and your risk level, maybe it's 1% Bitcoin, 99% cash, but your risk level will be dictated by those two things. I don't think you need the rest with the asymmetrics of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think I saw something recently. Now, I am desperately trying to search my memory bank here. So this is not truth, verified, do not trust what I'm about to say, but I saw something that said something like if you'd have held, it was somewhere between like 2 and 5% Bitcoin and 95 to 98% cash since 2020, it returned 17% a year and outperformed the S&P.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds true to me.
Okay, so that's the immediate thing. Can you go into a bit more detail about what you mean, like, finding some exposure? What does that exactly look like? With the platforms that you use, for example, are you able to get access to the ETNs, or do you need some kind of portfolio provider to put something together for you?
Well, no, what we're looking for is, just the asset allocation tools, the one that spit out a pie chart, and it will say this much in UK and this much in US and so on, and then take that data and find a platform that will give us access to what we need. I haven't actually done the work on finding out what platforms are likely to offer this. I suspect Fidelity will be one, with how pro Bitcoin they are. So yeah, we'll take that data and find a platform that fits, but we need the chart first, to work with. So
Yeah,
step one. Yeah,
that makes sense. And in terms of like an investment thesis, do you have any idea on what you're going to be doing in terms of asset allocation per client? I talk about in my workshops how much to allocate. I start small, 1 to 2%. That was something that Pete Dunworth said to me. He is the owner of the Bitcoin Advisor. He recommended, they're a financial advisor in Australia. He recommended 1 to 2% of his clients in 2016. That 1 to 2% has done 150x in 9 years.
Nice.
So suddenly, and the way he sold it to his clients was 1 to 2% is a bad day in the stock market. If this thing goes to zero, there's no reputational risk for you as the advisor. The client's not really going to notice it. They don't notice if the stock market goes down by 2% and their portfolio goes down by 2% day to day, right? So it's a bad day in the stock market. But and that's how I think that's a good entry point and a good jumping off point for people that aren't necessarily as well versed as you and I on Bitcoin. Like that's a palatable amount for themselves and their clients. But it sounds like you are a 95% Bitcoin maximalist by your own admission. So then what are you going to start thinking about in terms of asset allocation per client? Is it going to be totally client centric, or are you going to have some kind of investment thesis? And the reason I ask this is just yesterday or the day before, as we record this, Rick Edelman, the owner of the largest financial advice firm in the US, 1.3 million clients, 300 billion in assets under management, released his take on crypto. He used the term crypto, but he said the bare minimum, like a very risk averse client, should have 10% in crypto. He actually, I think he confirmed this on Twitter that he means absolute majoritively Bitcoin, but he used crypto because I think it's a more palatable term for people, more broadly known. But he said totally risk averse clients should be 10%, middling 30%, and adventurous clients should have 40% in Bitcoin. Now that to me is that's a large jump for people that have not gone through the significant drawdowns that we get in Bitcoin every 4 years, right? So what are you thinking in terms of your clients?
Yeah, so my favorite question to ask someone is, what percentage chance do you think there is that Bitcoin will disappear? Because if they say 99%, then you've got to put 1% of your portfolio in Bitcoin, right? Because what if it 100x's, but you won't miss 1%, like you're saying. Unfortunately, though, the asset allocation won't be driven by us, because you have to be able to show the skill set to create your own asset allocation, and that should come from people that do that all of the time. So the advisor you're describing, I've seen these on X, but is he American?
He is,
this advisor, yeah, because of course they tend to be a few years ahead of us on these things, don't they? So hopefully, with game theory, we feel like we have to do it, but we'll see. But if it is a few years down the line, then hopefully these tools have developed to the extent where they are saying 10-20% Bitcoin because they've seen that it works. So we're reliant on that. If I was to come up with my own asset allocation model, I'm exposing myself from a regulatory point of view. So yeah, we'll have to be patient.
Okay, that makes sense. So once the ban is lifted, then how is that gonna change when what might it change when you start speaking to clients? Because as from my understanding is from literally the day it's lifted, let's say it's lifted on the 30th of September, from the 1st of October, I don't even know if there's 30 or 31 days in September, but you, right, you understand, from the next day, in theory, you are then, from a regulatory standpoint, able to advise on it, right? Not just coach on it, not just say, look, this is what I invest in, maybe go and do some research. You're actually able to talk about it as an asset, as a new technology, as a new protocol, and say, look, this is what we're going to do for you. So how do you think those conversations will go from day one?
Well, I fear it will be 100% of my meeting because that's the level of enthusiasm I've got for it. But it would be a major part of the discussions because it's so unique and it's such a big opportunity. It's very, very important that people get it. And when they've got the green light from people they might see as necessary to get the green light from, like the government and so on. Then it'll just form a major part of our conversations. Every client review will likely have an allocation to Bitcoin as a recommendation, and we'll get everyone onto it as soon as humanly possible. It's as simple as that. It'll just be how quickly can we do this?
Blimey, okay, that's really refreshing to hear from a financial advisor, because you are right at the coalface of this, as you and I know, and I'm especially seeing that most reaction to Bitcoin flits somewhere between just total apathy, they don't understand it, not prepared to talk about it, to being very, very anti it. And I think you and I both know that the advisors that jump on this from day one are going to win. Mm-hmm. It's just a question of when. So it's is it 2 years from now? Is it 5 years from now? I think certainly 5 years from now. This is lifted from my conversation with Pete Dunworth again, who said that 100% of his business pretty much now just comes from referrals, because his clients have had 9 years in Bitcoin. That 1 to 2% now represents like 50 to 70% of their portfolio. So I would hope they've done some redistribution. And obviously, when they're on the golf course, they're talking to their clients about it. And the other thing he said was exactly as you've just described. So back in 2016, he basically flipped the script on all of their ongoing meetings and basically just spoke about Bitcoin for a year with all of their clients, or a year or two. None of them were that interested, but they trusted him and said, right, okay, 1 to 2%, no problem. All of those clients are now laser focused on Bitcoin. So it has forced them to become very educated on this new asset class, because it's it's driving, it's actually creating wealth beyond just protecting their purchasing power, which you and I both know. The money printing finds its way into the stock market. Money printing since 2008 and the performance of the Nasdaq have an almost 100% correlation. So just putting your money into equities protects your purchasing power. If it's only in equities, if you've got a very large proportion to bonds, you're probably losing purchasing power. So your hurdle rate is like 10, 11, 12% a year. Small allocations to Bitcoin mean that you can start returning 17, 18, 20. So you're actually creating wealth, not just protecting purchasing power. And so all of his clients, because as a consequence of that, are now learning and focusing on Bitcoin. The other thing they do, because they're a custodian, I really love this. So they've gone through 3 probates now, never lost a sat. But one of the things that they ask people when they're custodian with them, I think it's optional, but what they say is when you do pass away, we will hold on to your Bitcoin for 2 years after probate, if it's an option, because what it does is it forces your beneficiaries to have 2 years exposure to Bitcoin before they can get their hands on it to sell it. Because if you've obviously got a couple of million in Bitcoin and your kids can suddenly get their hand, they're like, sell it, it's amazing. But actually, if you have to hold it for 2 years, then you're going to become very interested. You're going to learn about it, and it might be worth 4 million a couple of years later. And so hopefully it lowers your time preference to be like, well, why don't we hold on to a bunch of this?
That's smart. Very smart. I think on this topic, by the way, it occurs to me that rebalancing is going to be a problem. If you make a ton from Bitcoin and then you have to sell it to rebalance back to the original risk level, then I don't quite know how we're going to deal with that, because clients will just be naturally becoming riskier as more of their portfolio is Bitcoin when it outgrows everything else. So that's one of the challenges our industry faces.
Yeah, and well, and it's a good challenge to have, right? I've made you so much money that we now need to rebalance it. But it's actually I cover off some of those stats in the workshop. So when I come in to present to you in Advanced Wealth, so I show what a 1 to 5 to 10% allocation would have looked like on a 60-40 portfolio between 2015 and the end of 2024. So 10 full years.
Right.
And I show the difference between if you rebalance it annually and if you don't rebalance it. So I'm not a big believer in a big reveal, so I can talk about it now. Like, even if you annually rebalance, you significantly outperform a 60-40 portfolio, right, over 10 years. But if you don't rebalance, so I think in the case of, if you'd have put 10% of a 60-40 portfolio on the 1st of January 2015 into Bitcoin, you would have returned like something like 1,600%. Something like that. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it's gone absolutely bananas. But Bitcoin now represents like 95%, 96% of your portfolio. So there is wild volatility, daily and annual volatility. So that volatility, and you're absolutely correct in that the challenge is going to be about what is the volatility you're prepared to accept, and optimizing the Sharpe ratio without Bitcoin just completely eating your portfolio. But hopefully as Bitcoin matures, that volatility will reduce. Obviously that means the returns may reduce, but someone like Michael Saylor, as you say, a genius like Michael Saylor, still thinks that it's going to be returning 21% a year 21 years from now.
Yeah indeed. And the compounding rate of that, of course, is what the $13 million Bitcoin he projects.
Well, I think if you saw the recent talk from Prague, so he actually predicts 21 million a coin, returning 21% a year, 21 years from now. So the only number you have to remember is 21.
I haven't seen that yet. Okay, interesting.
Highly recommend checking that out. Okay, so Chris, I think we've covered a lot today. I'm really happy with that. So let's talk about, I usually ask this question. It's a closing question, and I usually just ask it of the person, but I'm going to ask it of you as well. So outside of just number go up, what's one positive thing that Bitcoin has brought to your life? And then and outside of number go up, what is a positive thing that Bitcoin could bring to your clients' lives?
Well, for me, it totally re-energized me, honestly. Like, at the time, lockdown, I'd been advising for 15 years, which mean I'd have the same conversation thousands of times, same jokes, right? And it becomes difficult after a while. But then there was something new to really grab my attention and obsess about, and it doesn't feel like work, right? So it's given me something else that's exciting. And of course, it makes the future look much more interesting. And it changes the way you think about money, because of course, if you go and spend £1,000 on something and you take Bitcoin out to spend it, say you buy a £1,000 car, and then that 10x's and you've missed out on 10 grand, you've just spent 10 grand on a £1,000 car, right? So it just, it alters the way you view the world, but it makes you feel very optimistic about the future. So that's what it's brought for me. Yeah.
Okay. And then you think that would be translated to your clients as well?
Yeah. I'd really hope so. I mean, you find that if you do the work yourself, right? So they won't have that same impression of it unless they read the Bitcoin Standard and listen to Michael Saylor and all the rest of it. But those that do will hopefully feel the same way as most of us do.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So it creates a sense of low time preference, right? So when we think in fiat terms, if the kettle is slightly breaking, but it's not broken, you're like, well, I'll just replace it because it's going to cost £10 more a year from now. Whereas on the Bitcoin Standard, you're like, I will run this thing into the ground until I physically have to, because if I spend 50 quid on a new kettle, you're absolutely right. In Bitcoin, that could be worth 500 quid a couple of years from now. Like, I do not
Expensive
want to buy
kettle.
anything. Exactly. Chris, this has been great. Where can people find you and Advanced Wealth?
Okay, well, we're advancedwealth.co.uk. We're on X as well, but I'm only posting like once a week, so it's not massively active right now. But yeah, advancedwealth.co.uk, and we're based in Chelmsford, so that's us. Thank you, Dan. All right, you take care.